Hey everyone, welcome back to What's Your Favorite Scary Story? This week, we have no guests, so let's get into the first scary story, which is Concrete Cradle. Concrete Cradle. 4 walls, a floor, and a ceiling. All concrete. That kind of concrete where the muck was left to dry unsmooth, the kind that dried jagged and rough like waves with pins and razors at their crests. This is Leo's dungeon. No manacles or shackles lock him here, and there are no bars through which he might slip away. It's a blank, angry room with no place for Leo to rest his body without being cut or pricked. His arm is his only pillow. His crusted blood below him is his only mattress. Grime and dust are his only garments, painting rashes on his armpits and groin. Leo had a golden mane of hair before he was made a prisoner. He was well built and handsome. He was an actor. Out in the world, he was never alone, never in silence, always spinning his glittering gravity over the faces in the crowd. No longer. And how long has he been here? He couldn't say himself. The only ticking time he measures is the tide of his own breath. When there was a window, he could count the days, but it's long since disappeared. The ceiling is dropping. At irregular intervals, without cause, the concrete plane above him grates against the concrete planes beside. It's dropping, and there's no escaping its descent. If he hadn't been so afraid of pain and of death, he could have climbed the jagged walls and leapt from the window, but now his chance is gone. They always called him brave. The directors, the producers, the critics. They told Golden Leo he could take on any character and live inside them, never hesitating to risk it all for his craft. He never confessed them the truth, that he was, and remains, a coward, that his boldness was as much a character as any he played on stage or screen. The ceiling will crush him to death soon. He is already forced to lay on his side, clutching his knees. The ceiling squeezes his shoulder and hips, pressing the jagged waves of concrete into his skin. He bleeds more freely now, warm at the wound's source and cold where the blood dries and evaporates from his skin. All that he ever was is compressed into a few cubic feet of flesh. The agony gave way to madness long ago, and he imagines he's being hugged by an old friend. Or perhaps it's his mother cradling him to sleep. The ceiling scrapes a little further down the wall, and the brunt of its weight now rests on Leo. His pelvis cracks and his shoulder crushes into his ribcage, and yet he feels more love than he ever did on stage or in front of the camera, or when he was swept away by the screams of crazed fans. He feels more loved being ground to paste than he ever did when he was whole, if he indeed ever was. So this one was kind of sad, and I liked it. I mean, the person's in prison, you don't know why they're in this prison. It never really feels a need to tell you why, but you kind of feel bad for him and what he has to go through, and how by the end of it, his torture, he ends up liking more than his career, which is quite a deep message. But let's move on to our next story, Bubba. Bubba. This is the tale of a guy called Bubba, who wore a mask not made of rubber. Bubba enjoyed the simple things, like meeting new people and making them scream, or having a family barbecue, some missing hippies on the lunch menu, never without his trusty chainsaw, which gives off a murderous, rusty roar. Yes, Bubba was just a simple guy, with the ability to make most people cry. So I liked Bubba a lot because it reminded me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre of Leatherface. That's really the only reason I picked it, because it reminded me of that. It's not the greatest story, but he killed them hippies. That's all I'm saying. Let's read our third story and final story, Jackknifed. Jackknifed. I didn't see it. I didn't see the truck. The road was icy, the freezing fog was obscuring my vision, and I did not see the goddamn truck. It was carrying 2 trailers of goods, and the driver jackknifed on the road. I don't know what the truck driver saw that made him do it. The fog was so thick that by the time I could see the trailer, it was too late. I shouldn't have been going so fast. I would have had more time to react, but with all this ice, it wouldn't have mattered anyways. I would have just spun out of control and wrecked. I shook my head, looking around my new totaled car. There was a hole in the windshield. I looked to my right. My wife. She was missing. I began to panic. She was holding our son just before the truck jackknifed. She must have taken off her seatbelt. I panicked more as I struggled to free myself. It wasn't until the seatbelt came off that I realized I was upside down. I staggered out of the car. I shouted my wife's name over and over again. There was no response. I couldn't find her or the baby, and Melissa was just not replying. I shouted 4 more times, "Melissa!" as I staggered about while feeling woozy. My leg felt wet. I looked down and saw a piece of glass in my thigh. After a few moments of this, I decided to go to the truck. The driver had to have a med kit. Then they could help me find my wife and son. I tried to keep the panic down as I staggered to the truck. Part of me wanted to kill the driver, demand to know why they had jackknifed, but I ignored it. A different part of me wished that I hadn't been on the road. Melissa and Anthony would still be with me, but I knew deep down that if I had stayed, Melissa and Anthony would be dead. Not much of a difference it made now. As I arrived at the truck, the scene it painted was grim. The cab of the 18-wheeler was on its side. The driver was nowhere to be seen, but the door was open. I climbed up the cab and dropped into it. The medkit was open and used, but I still managed to patch myself up. Then I climbed out and peered into the fog. I heard voices and limped towards them. In the fog, I could vaguely make out 2 figures standing over someone. They shot him, and I realized they were members of the gang that had forced us out of town after the collapse. My heart dropped when I heard them mentioning a baby and a woman they had picked up out of a ditch, and how they were going to find and kill the man shouting her name. This one had a lot more detail than I expected and ended way different also than what I expected. I mean, killing people, getting people out of town, I could tell you that was something I was not expecting. I expected maybe the truck driver and his wife and his son were dead, but I got more than that. I mean, they died, the truck driver survived, but ends up getting shot by the gang member, which you assume they don't explicitly tell you, but I thought it was a pretty cool story. So, in terms of ranking these stories, I'm going to go Concrete Cradle, Jackknifed, and Bubba. So thank you everyone for watching. Leave a comment down below if there's a story you would like me to read. But let's flash forward to the next review.